All right, guys, we are back again with the COVID cabal, and we got some dark MAGA going on right here. I have never worn, guys, I gotta tell you, I have never worn the dark MAGA hat before. This is a new thing for me, wearing the dark MAGA hat. Um, Hold on here. I want to see if I can get the chat. I want to see if I can get the chat up before I roll into this, because I have not been able to. What did I do before here? If you guys got some comments, start dropping some comments in here so I can see how this comment stream is working. I want to make sure everything's working properly. So drop a comment in the stream right now so I know everything is going on correctly. Let's see here. All right, there we go. Kova Cabal, let's go. Let's go. I'm such a boomer. I'm just figuring out how this stuff works. All right, people. We got Omar saying, yo, Epstein did not kill himself. We got Rudy in here. All right. All right, I think we're rolling. So yeah, so this is my first Dark MAGA reveal. And yeah, we're gonna mix it up a little bit. I'm gonna try to keep this outfit as like the standard COVID Cabal outfit now. I mean, I'm not gonna say that we're always gonna be consistent with it, but we're gonna try to do this going forward. In fact, I have a big regret. I don't know if you guys saw, I was on Myron Gaines from Fresh and Fit. I was in his studio just last week with Enrique Tarrio and Ethan Norton, who are basically the number 1 and number 2 at the Proud Boys. So that was pretty cool. That was a pretty big honor. And I think it was a good show. I mean, look, it's kind of difficult to like I'm telling my story, right? But man, I mean, like what happened to them is a lot more intense than even what happened to me. So I want to talk, but I also don't want to overshadow those guys, because those guys are real men. They're honestly real patriots. Like one of the things from that show that just really blew me away with Enrique Tarrio is that they tried to get Enrique to admit, in exchange to have all his charges dropped, that Trump tried to stage an insurrection, that Trump directed them to go into the Capitol. Remember, Enrique wasn't even in DC. And he refused to sign it, so they gave him 22 years seditious conspiracy. They tried to wreck him. And I just was thinking about that, like, if Enrique had gone along with that, if he had less integrity, they may have actually been able to put Trump in prison. It's just kind of interesting how the integrity of individual men make a big difference. Elvis, Gary and I have been on really good terms for a long time. After my arrest, Gary was right there. He was there helping me. We beefed a bit in 2020, mostly I think out of misunderstanding. I think he thought I was trashing numerology, which I wasn't. It was a misunderstanding well under the bridge at this point. But yeah, anyway, I mentioned that show in part though because I'm like, what was wrong with me? Why didn't I wear this outfit there? Especially because like my hair's thinning. Like I could have used the MAGA hat to cover that up, and I could have had the sweatshirt. So anyway, it was a good time in Florida. A lot more shows about that coming up. But look, so before we get into all this stuff, I know you're supposed to start the COVID Cabal with some wine, and to be honest, I really wanted to do this show the last 2 days. And I had opportunity. We're having a Mardi Gras party and then going out to dinner with a bunch of people. And I was like, I can just crack some of this wine beforehand and I could do the Cabal then. But the timing really didn't work out. I couldn't get things going in time. I couldn't squeeze in the COVID Cabal between the other activities. And so I'm like, all right, I want to do it today. I got to still keep this, relatively recent in time frame because, the news cycle's constantly got stuff coming out. And I'm like, I don't want to drink. I don't want to drink again. I don't drink like I used to. Like I said this before, it's not healthy for me to drink all the time. It's not how I'm trying to have like a balanced life where I can have some glasses of wine here and there on certain occasions, but I don't like to make it like a regular night thing. I just don't want the alcohol in me. I don't enjoy it anymore. So I'm kind of like, but I got to give you guys something. So I gave you guys got a protein shake today. This is a protein shake. I'm gonna tell you what's in the protein shake. So in this protein shake, you have whey protein. Okay, obviously standard. And I don't know exactly everything I threw into that container because I threw some of the stuff in there, frankly, before prison. But I know that there was taurine, there was L-glutamine, a bunch of like random supplements that were in powdered form. Like I just threw it in the whole thing. And we've got some eggs in here. We've got we've got some blueberries, we've got some bananas. We've got some vanilla collagen peptides, so bone broth protein collagen peptides. I really like. I can't recommend that stuff enough. Collagen peptides are really great for you, and they taste great in coffee. I also throw some in the smoothies too because they taste great in everything. And let's see what else. Goat milk. We got some goat milk in here, and I also have some coconut yogurt. Now, usually we'll use non-fat Greek yogurt because you get tons of protein in that. So this is not the most protein. This could be like a supercharged protein shake. It usually is. This one is not. This one is not that, but it's got a lot of protein in there. Yeah, the collagen Alistair. This is a great point here. I don't really have joint issues, and I don't know if I'm not old enough for that. I have a little bit, maybe minor arthritis in my wrist, but that collagen powder, it's just great. I actually prefer the way coffee tastes with it. All right, so let's get to the stories here. So we got the two big dramas, and I think I know Elvis. I'm sure you're curious to get the take on this. We'll start with the Pam Bondi Epstein file drama. I'm going to tell you guys what I think is going on. I'm going to split the difference between a lot of the narratives that are out there. Okay, so let's hear what you have to say, Elvis, first. Either it's a slow disclosure where they have everything they are milking to get these people to do their bidding, or Trump setting up Cash Bondi and Bongino for failure because the other way around, these guys would all be in jail. Okay, so I'm just going to cut to the chase here, and I'm going to qualify all this stuff because I just have to qualify it, all right? We're all people. If you're on this COVID Cabal show, it's because you're investigating, you're aware of the secret societies, you're aware of various groups and, subversion across our planet, basically. And one of the things we're just going to have to cover this. We're going to have to address it. One of the things that you always get to is the Jews, right? Everyone talks about the Jews, specifically the Zionists. And I think that's an important distinction to make. And we're seeing like RFK coming out with posts on anti-Semitism. There's a lot of mixed. There's obviously a group of Jews that are embedded in the global system. Okay, there's just no question about it. And Zionism is completely connected to that. So if that offends some people, it offends some people. This has nothing to do with individual Jews or individual Israelis. I wish that people were capable of being able to hold these ideas in their head at the same time that the individual people from the state of Israel probably have every right to feel threatened and feel like they have to defend themselves, even if, let's say what happened on October 8th was a setup by Netanyahu, which is, I think, kind of plausible. I've talked to people in the IDF who patrolled that area, and they said there's no way that anything could possibly have gotten through without anybody knowing about it, right? And Netanyahu is about to lose his coalition, about to lose power. So, but the reason that people don't like to hear this stuff is because they assume that if you talk about, for instance, Israel being behind 9/11 or the USS Liberty, that means that you're trying to hate individual Jews. I do not hate individual Jews. Okay, I really don't. I know a lot of them in real life. I like them. They're good people. When I came out of prison, there was a January 6th plaque in my house that had names of all the January 6ers who had been arrested with the ones who had been killed in top letters. And it was a beautiful thing for me to get literally as I walked out of prison like an hour beforehand. And that was given to me by the son of an Orthodox Jewish man who I know, David Feldman on Twitter. So, I mean, they're good people. There's a lot of good people, and people are people, you know what I mean? But yeah, there is a Zionist influence, and anybody who studies the stuff that's been going on with America knows that America has been guided by Zionist influences for a very, very long time. And if you really dig into 9/11, this is my opinion from my own research, that Israel was behind it. It's just my analysis of it. All the signs point to it, regardless of which way you look. So, Epstein obviously is a similar case. Epstein is a Mossad agent. Um, None of this stuff is all really well known. He was part of an international blackmail ring. So he's working for the cabal, and a lot of the cabal is synonymous with the Zionists. You can at least say the Zionists are a faction of the cabal. I think that you can divide the cabal into neoconservatives and neoliberals. In the neoconservatives, we would say, are the Anglo-Zionist, neoconservatives, I'd say, are like Anglo-Zionist faction. And then the neoliberals are sort of like the Euro-commie faction. And they really are, at the end of the day, two sides of the same coin. But they, I think that the Zionist, Anglo-Zionist faction, the neoconservatives, they've tried to focus much more on explicit military power and domination, whereas the Euro-commie neoliberal faction focuses much more on subversion, cultural subversion. And they obviously take little spats with each other, but that just is what it is, right? Okay, so why am I talking about all this stuff? Well, we're talking about what's going on with the Epstein list. And I think that there's a really good chance that they keep trying to release this stuff, and they're like, how the fuck are we going to release all this classified information if it points back to Israel? I'm serious about this. I mean, how are you supposed to show what was really going on with Epstein if it ties back to all the stuff that Israel's been doing? It's a really difficult bind. Now, I say this, and people will say, well, that's because Trump is this, he's part of the Zionist crew and everything. And I really don't believe this. I don't believe it. I don't see it. What I see is a frenemies situation. So I don't know if you guys remember. And guys, if you're tracking me with this, drop some comments so I know that you guys are following what I'm saying here. When we had the situation with Gaza a few weeks ago, Trump basically said he was going to annex Gaza, right? He said he wanted to annex Gaza. Okay, cool. Netanyahu wasn't prepared for that. Netanyahu freaked out. His face was not very good. Netanyahu gave Trump like a pager, a golden pager. Remember, the pagers were used to blow up the people in Hezbollah. So what I see going on here is like an agree and amplify kind of thing with Trump, where Trump is the greatest friend in the world to Israel. We're with you with everything. But he's kind of like he's kind of drawing them out into the open while still pretending to be their friend. And I also think that part of the reason that Trump is doing this is because Trump is trying to have them, and I think it's also one of the reasons why there's a lot of talk about the anti-Semitism stuff, because I genuinely think Trump, for good reason, doesn't want individual Jews to suffer for the crimes of the Zionist government in Israel. I genuinely think that that's the case, and that there's a tightrope here where they want to get the truth out, and they will get the truth out, but some things need to progress before all of it can be really properly disclosed, and it has to be done in a delicate way. Otherwise, what happens is we just end up Oh, is this whole thing reversed? So I see what you're saying, Jackson, but it's like my chat's gone the opposite direction for whatever reason. So he's trying to, I think, make it so that the disclosure doesn't rebound on Jews in too bad of a way, and that there can be really, because when we talk about in Western governments, we're talking about, for instance, um, we're not trying to say that the American people were bad. We were talking about the elites that controlled America, right? And we were saying the same thing in Canada. We're saying the same thing in Europe. That it was the elites that were the issues. That was the issue. And I think that people agree with that in general across Western countries, but they have a little bit more difficulty with it when it comes to Israel itself. They forget that. I've had to even remind myself of that. It's like, wait a minute, they're just regular people too. The nation has a different historical context, but so I think that it has to come out in a slow manner, partially because of just the degree to which the alliance that Trump has with many. I don't want to call it an alliance. I think that they're using each other. The Zionists were kind of put in a position with Kamala Harris that they needed to support Trump. They needed to support Trump because if they didn't support Trump, then they were going to get someone who actively opposed them from the Euro commie faction. So Trump, I think, played them against each other and said, "Look, I'm going to support Israel. I'm going to support Israel." But it doesn't look to me like Netanyahu is controlling things in the government. To me, it looks like Netanyahu is sort of having the knee bent, but is scheming at the same time. It's not over. There's a lot of internal tension because I think what we see on the surface is not really. I don't know how to explain this. I don't know if I'm explaining it well enough for you guys, but I do not. It feels very different. Everything feels very different if you compare it to Biden, if you compare it to Obama, if you compare it to certainly Bush, even if you compare it to Trump first term, it's just very different. It's just very different. Um, it's a different vibe. So I think that's what's happening, and I don't know how clear this is, but there's going to be a slower rollout as a result of all of this, because I think that's just the way it has to happen. I think it has to happen that way. Um, you know, did did Pam Bondi like I don't know specifically, did Pam Bondi lie? Did she not really see the Epstein files, but she trusted? Are they all just kind of spinning us? I don't think that they're spinning us in the sense that they're not going to ultimately release it. But there might be some sort of narrative that they're trying to create where they're they're trying to reveal the different elements in the security state that have been concealing it. And I think, as is the usual strategy with Trump, they're ultimately giving him enough rope to hang themselves. But I absolutely do not believe that we are going to get rug pulled on this stuff by the end. And I also want to say, I mean, we all want this stuff to happen quickly. Things are happening very quickly. I mean, we're now a month and change into the Trump administration. There has been so much done in this time period. I just, we need to be a little bit more patient and gracious to people, especially considering the fact that they are dealing with such really terrible, corrupt elements underneath of them. I mean, the American bureaucracy is completely filled with these sort of people. So the idea that there's been sabotage is completely like plausible. Completely plausible. I'm not saying Pam Bondi didn't lie about having read it. But how much of the whole thing was designed to spark outrage because they're using that for more fuel because they want people to dig deeper, they want people to reveal things. I don't know. I don't want to like be overly. I don't want to go too far with it, but I'm just saying that this is some of the stuff I'm seeing. And yeah, I mean, I don't think people like Nick Fuentes, I think, certainly have been negative and Nick didn't even support MAGA. You know what I mean? I just don't. If you get caught up in like the anti-Semitism stuff, and I think this is true with racism or anything, you know, if you get too caught up in these things, it's one thing to be like identifying differences and identifying, you know, that subjective reality. We are all different people. You know, and we're different groups. But when you start to get to the point of hating, you have to just watch it because it can start to poison your soul. It literally can. And I'm not saying that from some sort of woke shit. I'm saying this as somebody who loves off-color jokes, makes them all the time, and you know, very observant about differences. But you got to still have love in your heart. You know what I mean? You can't allow differences to make you hate. Um, and the people who you hate people based on the things that they do, not um things that they can't control based on like their background. You know, you just can't do that. So that's the Epstein Pam Bondi stuff. I think we're gonna find out more, but you have to have faith in people like Kash Patel. These are people who really from the very beginning have been like on the Q stuff. They've been talking about it. They've been drawing attention to all this corruption. They're gonna get it out. How they get it out is a whole different mess, and I think that there's also a lot of things behind the surface we don't know. Keep the pressure on. We have every right to be demanding the truth. We have every right to be demanding this stuff happen, but I don't personally feel that Pam Bondi has violated trust so much that I feel like she's a stooge. I don't know how to explain this stuff, guys. It's just a lot of it is just like a feeling, like an ability to read these individuals. I don't. In the first term, there were a lot of people that Trump brought on. I'm like, this guy's a clown. He has a record for being a clown. I just haven't really seen that in Trump's cabinet. I don't think he's being manipulated by Pam Bondi. I think she's on the same page. When Kash Patel was sworn in, Cash and Pam had been like they'd really been on the same side for a while. They have a plan that's been coordinated together. Trump brought them both in together. So this is a lot dirtier and difficult than we really give ourselves than we give credit for knowing about. You know what I mean? So we'll see what happens. We will see what happens. A good pivot to here is to talk about Ukraine because this gets into the same kind of, you know, Zionist related stuff too. Although now focusing much more on the Anglo side of things. So you had Keir Starmer talking about how UK is going to send troops into Ukraine, blah, blah, blah. I don't really, this stuff is so ridiculous to me. I mean, Europe is really, I love my Europeans, but Europe's just like, it's so pathetic right now. It's more pathetic than America was when we were under the control of Biden, because America did so many clownish things, and Biden was literally like senile dude, shit in his pants. But America was more scary during that time period, right? Because America under Biden was it was still a country that had all this power. It had the ability to inflict so much harm around the world, so much harm around the world. And it seemed like it was just like this crazy psychopathic government, you know? It was very unpredictable in a bad way. America had the ability to really start World War III under Biden. And I think all that stopped it is that the deep state doesn't really want World War III. What they really want is just because it damages too many things if it happens. What they really want is more control. And so they try to use the illusions of war to gain more control. But at this point, yeah, I don't think that they can actually take it to that route. Many theories about that, why that is. But I don't think the will's not there for it to even happen. I mean, another thing I'll say is when the population gets to a certain level of consciousness, you're not able to create a war. You're not able to have it happen. Like I don't see people around the West willing to go to war for the cabal. It's just not going to happen. I mean, you saw some of the videos after Keir Starmer announced this. They were going around, London, and you have all these migrants there, and they're like, "Oh, I'm from like Pakistan. This is not my problem. Like, I'm not gonna fight in this war." So you have on one hand the immigrants won't fight in the war, and then you have the actual ethnic Britons. They're not going to fight in it because they don't want to fight for a country that hates them. Right. I mean, Property Prince is saying it perfectly here. Like this is just how it is. Keir Starmer can't organize a tea party, let alone a world war. They don't have any authority. But what you see happening in Europe, though, right now, it is really pathetic because, yeah, the United States under Biden was still extremely dangerous. It still had America was being attrited. Don't get me wrong. You know, the weaknesses in our military were starting to come through, but we were still fucking dangerous. I mean, we still had force protection capability. It would have taken another 10, maybe 20 years of those kind of policies for the United States to actually start to seem like a feckless military. Europe's militaries are just a complete embarrassment. I mean, you know, I'm seeing some of these countries from the Baltic states. You have like Estonia trying to talk about like, what we need to do. Like just shut the fuck up. Go shut the fuck up. Like sit in the corner and like don't talk. Don't say anything. No one wants to hear what you have to say. These countries should not even be allowed at the table. Honestly, they shouldn't even be allowed at the table. And they don't, especially because of their attitude. They don't. It doesn't matter if they're on the border. They have no right to dictate terms. If you can't even field an artillery unit, you have no right to dictate terms about what you want to happen. You can ask America and back channel to let your country survive, but that's about it. Everything else, you have no leverage. You're a population of 1 million people, and you have no military. So you're a border state. You're vassals. And the issue is that, and I made a long post about this, is a lot of these European countries, they've been so used to being given a seat at the table and being treated like like it was a team effort, that they really started to believe it, that they were still important, and they're not. They're not important at all. I believe this was a few years ago, but I believe that Ukraine in a single week took more casualties than Britain Britain was capable of fielding in the battlefield, and that they would have been completely combat ineffective if they had sustained the casualties that Ukraine staged. Before the Russo-Ukraine war, Ukraine's military was so strong, it could go across all of Europe and take over all of Europe. 600,000 people. It's a big military. It was a big military with like practical active duty troops. So I mean, I would love to see Europe. I want to cut Europe loose from NATO. And so I think the question here, right? So we have, do you see us fully backing out of Ukraine, or is Trump saying this table for negotiations? I believe that we will. Look, I think Russia's gonna win the war. The question is just, what does that look like? What does it look like? I don't. So we see Zelensky coming back to the table now with the mineral rights deal with the United States. And this is all a way for us to have American investment in Ukraine so that Russia can't take over the country, because it's kind of like a economic tripwire to get America involved. But I think a lot of this is Trump trying to make America come out of this with saving face. It's not clear to me that Ukraine's rare earth metals are really that substantial, especially since most of the rare earth metals that they have are actually in the Donbass area. So there's a lot of like confusing things with this. because I've been hearing rumors that Ukraine already gave the rights of these rare earth metals to the UK. I don't know, guys. It just seems to me that we're watching in real time the breakup of NATO. It's very clear that the European Union wants to try to manipulate and direct the United States into actions that are going to serve them and make us bear the cost. And it's also eminently clear that Trump's not going to let himself get baited into that. So if that's what's happening, so that you have the situation where we're still in NATO, but it's clear, like just like we were talking about before with Israel and in US, I see the same thing going on with EU slash UK with the US with the rest of NATO. That it's like a frenemies kind of dynamic. And I don't know how long this lasts for. I really think eventually you have an implosion. And when you have an implosion, what happens next? You know, European banks, like from what I'm understanding, the Bank of England, the European Central Bank, they do not have even the hard currency. And the Fed has been waging a war on these banks, pulling gold back to the United States. So I don't know what's going to even happen to these countries financially. It's not even just that they don't have military to fight; they don't have the financial mechanisms to be able to do things when all is said and done. And to me, it's like we are watching the end of this global system. And I do think that Trump has a strategy to let them reveal themselves. I think he's playing a patient game. They just it's going to unravel on its own. Um I have to tell you that I just do not I don't know if Ukraine's going to be a sovereign country by the end of it. Um Certainly seems like Trump and people are fighting for that, and maybe it'll happen. But it seems to me also that, Russia continues to talk about how Ukraine's its historical territory. If Ukraine remains an independent country after the war, I think it's going to be mostly under Russian influence and control. You're not going to have U.S. forces there in Ukraine. I don't know. If I have to go with my instincts here, I think Trump knows that, if you have European forces are going to try to get involved with Ukraine. If Europe's not going to let Ukraine go, then they're going to force basically Russia to take it. The most important thing for Trump is to just have the blame not be on the United States, but to be on Europe. And I think that's what's going to happen. I really do believe that Europe is going to have a hard time allowing it to end. Zelensky is a cabal puppet. There is so much money that they were getting through this, and there's so many crimes that government has committed that's connected to cabal activity globally. It just seems to me that I don't believe them when that there's going to be some kind of honest peace with Russia. They're not capable of that kind of agreement. So everything to me is just a bluff followed by another scheme, which is going to fail, followed by a bluff and another scheme, which is going to fail. And they're going to keep doing that until it's completely obvious what's going on. The honest to God truth is that in the end, I don't think that Ukraine even has any future unless Russia controls it. I think Russia will actually rebuild it. That may sound very naive, and maybe it is, but I actually think that Russia, because it has a historical association with there, and even today, some degree of I think the way Putin talks about the war, he talks about it like it's a civil war. Ukrainians may disagree about that. A lot of Westerners may disagree about that, but I'm just telling you what the Russian perspective is. Um, I think that Putin looks at it at the very least, kind of like America looks at Canada, and I think we're going to be getting these global spheres of influence. And Russia's sphere of influence is certainly going to include its historic territories. There's no question about that. Um, America's, I think, is going to be U.S., Canada, Greenland. Yeah. Spoke to a guy who said he was from Crimea. Exactly. So, I think that's where we're at. I think that's where we're at right now. The Zelensky thing was a total flop. It looks like Zelensky may have come. I mean, he was on cocaine. He talked like he was on cocaine. We know he does it all the time. A lot of these Eurocrats use it. And it also looks like he may have been prodded by these European powers to, test Trump, push back against Trump. They just don't have cards, guys. They just don't have any cards to play. This is the thing. They don't have any cards to play in this great game. The US has cards to play. It has the most cards by far. Russia has cards to play. China has cards to play. The European Union doesn't have cards to play. So really what we're doing is we're just constantly allowing things to be revealed. And there is going to be some proactive aspects on our side, but so much of the revealing is ultimately coming from them because it lets them basically own their own karma. If you want to take this also from a higher perspective, it lets them take their own karma. They're creating these outcomes for themselves, for their own actions. No one can say that Trump was vindictive because they're the ones who keep, Trump operates in good faith with Ukraine, but he knows Ukraine is operating in bad faith. So think about that for a second. Like, he knows that he's not dumb. He knows what they've been doing. He knows they've been stealing money. So to some extent, he knows they're not going to keep their word. But if you go publicly and try to make an agreement with somebody in good faith and they don't keep their word, they lie and everything, what you're doing is you're humiliating them. You're sabotaging them. It's a form of strategy to get people to reveal themselves. I did this with a guy in prison. It was my own way of dealing with it rather than having to get violent, although it almost got violent anyway, because at the end, the guy was desperate and feral. But at that point, I had such a huge alliance around me, he was screwed. It's the same sort of thing. You let them reveal themselves. I think that's what's going on. I think it's what's going on with Epstein. I think it's what's going on with Ukraine. And for everybody, if you're involved with any of the Q stuff, you also know that Israel for last, right? They're the ones who are probably going to get revealed last. So we got to be patient. Things are moving fast. I believe, I think it's interesting that Doge is officially supposed to be done July 4th, 2026. Okay, 250th anniversary. So let's then just use very lightly and loosely. Let's use very lightly and loosely that date as a date for things to happen. I think it's an appropriate date for multiple reasons. It's before the midterms, right? So, you really have like a year and a half to get shit done. And that's basically exactly what we got with the Doge window. So let's give this whole thing a year and a half to unravel before we start to get too neurotic about it. Let's have a little bit more faith. Trust the plan, God's plan, right? I think things are going phenomenally. I'm really excited about it. I just think there's a lot of moving parts and there's a bigger strategy here, and there's just no reason to rush. If you've got people in a siege and you've already been sieging them out, and you got to wait one more week to do it, or you could just attack them now. But if you waited one more week, you do it cleaner. Why wouldn't you wait? It's just patience. We have to adjust our mindset to be patient, so long as we're still focused on the outcome. And I'll say this also to listen, my son. I'm excited about tonight's address. Should be interesting. This is the great George Bruno, but you guys got to watch his show on YouTube. It's phenomenal. George is a good friend of mine. If you are, this is something that I didn't even think to talk about because I forgot about it. The fact that it's actually, I made this COVID cabal March 5th, but it's actually March 4th today. Everybody in the Q community talked a lot about March 4th, and I think I'm gonna close with this. March 4th was the former inauguration day of the PR. So a lot of people have talked about we're going to go back to the original Constitution. So that's March 4th. That's the real President's Day, or the real inauguration day. I don't know if that's literally going to happen, but there's certainly some interesting symbolism about it. And if we go back to the deltas, all the way back to the beginning, right? when back in 2020 when I started COVID Cabal, and we're almost at the anniversary, right? Just a few more weeks from now, we're at the anniversary. Maybe a week from now, we're at the anniversary. We all thought, or were at least considering, that all this stuff was happening in March, April, right? But maybe we were just 5 years off. Maybe it was too premature in the cycle. A lot of the things, if you go back and read into a lot of the theories, they make a lot more sense now than they did then. So let's just keep an open mind this year. We're only a month and change in, 5 weeks in. I think it's going to be good. I think it's going to be good, and we'll keep these COVID cabals coming, guys. We'll I'm gonna try to have them more often, because it just feels like there's so much more happening. You know what I mean? Um, Notwithstanding my circumstances back during the Biden era, it just was a lot harder to see developments. So, and this is a good point here, right? Back then, speculation on biolabs in Ukraine would have landed you in a mental institution. Now it's proven. Imagine what we will know in the same time period. We have, based on just everything that we've learned in the last month or two, if we just keep scaling this up, and if Trump gives it a boost tonight, if maybe he does a big reveal about some things, maybe we start to have this conversation more out in the open. I just see a checkmate situation, so let's be patient. We're not going back to any denial about these things. It's going to come out. It's just a matter of when, how quickly, and I think that there's a plan. I'm not saying that they've controlled everything that's going on, but I think there's a plan. All right, gentlemen. Well, we are getting to the top of the elite pyramid. Ukraine, Epstein could blow apart the whole trillion-hair stranglehold. It's coming. I'll tell you guys it's coming. I will see you guys on the next COVID Cabal.